It is February of 1959, in the heart of the Soviet Union. This was an era of iron will and ambition, a time when humanity saw nature as a frontier waiting to be conquered. For 10 young students of the Ural Polytechnical Institute, that frontier was the Ural Mountains. But these were no amateurs. They were a team of highly experienced hikers and skiers, all officially certified for the most difficult expeditions. Their leader was the 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, an ambitious and intelligent man known for his meticulous planning. This expedition to the formidable Otorten mountain was meant to be his crowning achievement. The team was a collection of bright minds and strong spirits. They were engineers and physicists, but above all, they were friends, bound by a shared love for the unforgiving beauty of the wilderness. 10 of them began the journey, but only one would survive. Yuri Yudin was forced to turn back early, suffering from severe joint pain. It was a simple twist of fate, a painful goodbye that would unknowingly save his life, while the other 9 continued their journey into the unknown. The first days of the expedition were filled with the typical challenges and joys of a winter trek. The hikers' own diaries and photographs paint a picture of youthful optimism. They documented their journey and smiled for the camera. They were unaware that they were creating the final records of their own existence. Their destination was a mountain named Kholat Syakhl. In the language of the local Mansi people, the name translates to a chilling omen, the Mountain of the Dead. By January 31st, the group had reached the edge of the highland area. They were preparing for the final, most difficult leg of their journey, the climb. They cached some of their food and equipment here for the return trip, a supply store for a journey home that they would never make. February 1st, the day they began their ascent up Kholat Syakhl. The weather, which had been manageable, took a turn for the worse. Snowstorms and decreasing visibility likely caused them to deviate from their planned route. They drifted west, towards the exposed slope of the mountain. Realizing their mistake, they made a fateful decision. Instead of retreating to the safety of the forest below, they decided to make camp right there, on the open slope. Why did they do this? A question that has baffled investigators for decades. Dyatlov may have wanted to practice camping on a mountain slope, or perhaps he simply didn't want to lose the altitude they had gained. Around 5 p.m. they pitched their tent. They were professionals. They did everything right. But they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Inside the tent, they ate a meal of salted pork, crackers, and tea. They were cold, but likely in good spirits, planning to continue their trek the next morning. They even produced a satirical newspaper, the Evening Otorten, full of in-jokes and light-hearted articles. It was the last thing they would ever write. Sometime between 9:30 p.m. and 11:30 p.m., something happened. Something terrifying. Something that caused these 9 experienced hikers to do the unthinkable. They used a knife and cut their way out of the tent from the inside. They fled into the pitch-black -30-degree wilderness. Without their coats, without their shoes. Why? What could possibly be more terrifying than the certainty of freezing to death? This is the central mystery of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. It was not the mountain that killed them. It was fear. And as the days turned into weeks, a search began. A search for 9 missing students that would uncover a puzzle of horrors. On February 26th, after weeks of searching, a pilot spotted it from the air. A single dark shape against the endless white. The abandoned tent. The first search party arrived on foot. The scene they found was deeply unsettling. The tent was half buried in snow and badly damaged, but the damage wasn't from the weather. It was clear the tent had been sliced open from the inside. This was not an escape. It was a desperate flight. Most of the team's belongings, their coats, shoes, and supplies, were still inside, neatly arranged. They had fled into a frozen hell with almost nothing. But the investigators found something else. Footprints. 9 sets of them, leading away from the camp, down the slope towards the forest. The prints told a story of chaos and contradictions. Some were barefoot, others wearing only socks. They were not running in panic, but walking in a steady, organized line. After 500 meters, the tracks vanished, covered by the relentless snow. The trail went cold, but the search party followed the direction they were headed, towards the tree line. And there, under a giant ancient cedar tree, they found the first horrifying clue: the remains of a small fire. And beside the dead fire lay the first 2 bodies, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. They were stripped down to their underwear. Their hands were torn and bloody, as if they had desperately tried to climb the tree. Perhaps to escape something on the ground, or to look for something in the distance. The search continued. 3 more bodies were found between the cedar tree and the camp. Igor Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. They seemed to have been crawling back to the tent when they succumbed to the cold. Slobodin had a fractured skull, though it was not considered a fatal injury. 5 bodies found. All died of hypothermia. A tragic but seemingly straightforward hiking accident. But the question remained: why did they run from the tent in the first place? And a more pressing question lingered in the biting wind. Where were the other 4 hikers? The search for the remaining 4 hikers dragged on for 2 more months. Spring began to thaw the mountain, revealing its secrets. Finally, they were found, buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine not far from the cedar tree. And what the investigators discovered with these last 4 bodies changed everything. These hikers were better dressed. It appeared the others had given them their clothing. But they had not died from the cold. They had died from massive, violent trauma. Nicolas Thibault-Brignol and Semyon Zolotaryov had crushed chests, injuries consistent with the force of a car crash. Yet, there were no external wounds, no bruises. The horror did not end there. Lyudmila Dubinina was also found with similar chest injuries, but she was also missing her tongue and parts of her face. Alexander Kolovatov was found with them, dead of hypothermia, but his body held another clue. Tests on the clothing of these last 4 hikers revealed something inexplicable. They were radioactive. The official investigation was abruptly closed. The final report was classified. The cause of death was stated as a compelling natural force. A compelling natural force? What does that even mean? It's a phrase that explains nothing and hides everything. A bureaucratic wall put up against an impossible truth. And there was one last detail. A final piece of high strangeness. Other hikers in the region that night reported seeing bizarre, fast-moving orange spheres in the sky. Internal injuries, a missing tongue, radiation, and strange lights in the sky. This was no hiking accident. The puzzle was now infinitely more complex and far more terrifying. So, what truly happened on the Mountain of the Dead? For decades, investigators, researchers, and conspiracy theorists have tried to answer that question. Let's examine the most plausible theories. First, the avalanche. Could a sudden slab of snow have hit the tent, causing the internal injuries and forcing them to flee? It's a strong theory, but it doesn't explain why they walked nearly a mile downhill, or why the tent and their skis were not fully buried. Experienced hikers argue the slope wasn't steep enough for a major avalanche. Theory 2. Infrasound. Could a rare weather event called a Kármán vortex street have generated a low-frequency sound that is inaudible to humans, but can induce intense, irrational panic and terror? This could explain their bizarre flight from the tent, but it doesn't explain the massive internal trauma or the radiation. This leads us to the most popular conspiracy theory: a secret Soviet weapons test gone wrong. Were the orange spheres a missile or a new type of aircraft? This could explain the secrecy, the radiation, and the compelling force. Perhaps the hikers stumbled upon something they weren't meant to see and were eliminated. But by what? And how? Other theories are even more exotic, involving a panicked escape from a Yeti or a close encounter with a UFO. In a case with so few answers, human imagination fills the void. In the end, we are left with 9 silent victims and a mountain that keeps its secrets. Each clue only seems to deepen the mystery, pulling us further into a labyrinth of maybes. Perhaps the truth is a mundane combination of these theories. A small avalanche, followed by panic, disorientation, and a tragic series of bad decisions in an unforgiving environment. Or perhaps something truly unknown and terrifying unfolded that night on the slopes of the Mountain of the Dead. A secret that the snows of the Urals will keep forever.